and welcome to our second tutor workshop for 2025. My name is Thabang Sarolela. I am a manager in the CPD and Registration Department of Pharmacy Council. Today we are here and we're really excited to have you tonight. So we will be taking you through this workshop, which has already been presented on the 7th of this month. So I am with Dr. Nelaveni Padayachi, Dr. Rianda Jubet, and Mr. Mlatete Makado. They are the ones who will be taking you through the first part of the presentation, and they are here as assessors and moderators of InternCPD. So the second part will be facilitated by myself, and I will be taking you through the CPD platform so that you can see what's happening, especially now after the introduction of the plagiarism detection system. So we are encouraging you to be with us. The workshop is scheduled for 3 hours, and we will appreciate if you can be with us until the end of the workshop, because the information that is going to be shared here tonight is important, since it will assist you to be able to know how to verify interns' portfolio of evidence, and also what kind of support you can give them as they continue with their internship. And towards the end of the workshop, there will be a survey that will be shared. There will be a link that will be shared with you. Please note that that survey will also be used as a proof of attendance, and we are requesting you to make sure that you complete it. And lastly, the presentation will be available on the website after today's workshop, meaning from tomorrow. It will be available. In case you want to refer, please feel free to do so. And you can also advise other tutors who couldn't make it to this workshop to go to the website to find the presentation. With those few words, I just want to say feel free and enjoy the workshop. And I want to hand over to Dr. Padayachi to take us through. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you, Thabang. Thank you, everybody. Welcome, and we're really excited to have the tutors here this afternoon. I'm just going to share my screen. Are you able to see my screen, Thabang?
Yes, please. Yeah, thank you. Now it's on presentation mode. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So as I was saying, we're really excited to have you here, and thank you for taking the time in your very busy schedule, and we know you're very busy. So just to start off by saying, we really do deeply appreciate the invaluable role that you play in shaping the future of our interns. And we know that your guidance and your mentorship not only equips them with essential skills, but also inspires them in terms of their growth into professional, confident individuals. Your dedication and time that you invest in the development does not go unnoticed by the South African Pharmacy Council. And therefore, the South African Pharmacy Council is committed to providing the resources you need, from tutor workshops such as these to regular feedback on an ongoing basis, be it via the assessor or the moderator. Together, we can create a nurturing environment that empowers young minds while celebrating your contributions every step. So thank you so much for all your efforts. And before we begin, just to make a note that the tutor training is really here as a guide to assist you to understand essentially how the assessors and moderators apply their assessments to the interns' submissions, to give you some insight on how we go about doing it. but also that South African Pharmacy Council has a view from a tutor perspective. So it's going to begin. So to give you a brief background as to what the outline looks like. So it's the introduction, some of the resources that you will have access to, definition of what CPDs are, what is your role as a tutor, some administrative information, and then we go deep diving into the portfolio of evidence, and my colleagues will take you through the CPD cycle. So just to give you some insight into some of the important resources that you have access to, this comes straight out of the intern tutor manual. So before I actually get into the detail of the references, I'd like to also reiterate the
I'm
importance of the
sorry.
intern manual.
I'm sorry, Vinny.
Yes, Siobhan.
Your slides
Yeah.
are not moving. We are still on the first slide. Thank you.
Yeah, Vinny, can you just
Share
stop
slide.
sharing and then share again?
Yeah, I'm going to try that. Can you see my slide now?
Me.
Not yet.
I'm going to see it now.
Not yet.
Give me seconds. Still nothing?
Nothing.
Just give it a moment. No, it's still not working.
Okay. Maybe Rianda can assist my side.
Okay, let me try to share. This one. Just want to get into presentation mode. Sorry about that. Okay, can you see it?
Yes, Rianda, it says that it's not yet on the presentation mode, but I think Vinny can start as you're getting it right. If you can just put it on the presentation mode.
And you can move to slide 3 and then I can talk through it while it goes into, yeah.
Okay.
So, sorry about that. Not in presentation mode, but I'll go ahead and speak. So in terms of the important resources, as I was saying earlier, I think one of the key things that we need to re-emphasize is the importance of the intern manual. And the intern manual is really a fantastic resource that is a comprehensive document that provides essentially all of the information that you require as a tutor, but also that the intern requires. And from our experience as assessors and moderators, we often find that the interns don't use the manual effectively in order to obtain the information that they require. And therefore, sometimes it results in not the intern being not competent or missing information, etc. So just to remember and to encourage your interns to read through the manual comprehensively to get all of the information. And I think it's still on
Okay.
PowerPoint mode, not on the presentation.
I'm sorry about that.
No, I'm not sure what's happening. Can we just move on to the next slide?
Okay, let's just move on to number 4.
Okay,
Slideshow.
Rianda, at the bottom of the screen there should be somewhere here that, yes, there
There.
should be,
Is it now in
Uh,
presentation mode? Still not.
still not.
Okay, I'm just going to talk through it. Apologies for that. So in terms of describing what the portfolio of evidence is, it really is the precursor towards becoming a pharmacist that encompasses all of the requirements, as you can see in the World Health Organization model. And as you're familiar with already, the CPD is really a cyclical process. So what we thought is to bring in the World Health Organization model, which is, as you can see in the left picture, it describes the various roles that a pharmacist is expected to perform. So you'll see entrepreneur, team player, manager, researcher, leader, caregiver, communicator, decision maker, lifelong learner, and teacher. So essentially that incorporates what a pharmacist's role should be. So when you look at the 10-star pharmacist, and that's the World Health Organization model, we thought, how do we as pharmacists ensure that we comply or align to this 10-star pharmacist World Health Organization model? And we thought to give you some ideas of how we do this was to ensure competence in the practice, promoting lifelong learning, developing the intern's professional skills, enhancing the intern's career prospects, supporting their regulatory compliance and understanding, building confidence, encouraging ethical practice, and preparing them for future learning challenges or future challenges that they may face. Next slide, Rihanna. Thank you. So when you look at the role of a tutor, and this is quite explicitly done in the intern tutor manual, essentially as a tutor, there are key core components of your role. So you would be acting as a mentor, a coach, and a role model. So how do you as a tutor shape academic and personal growth? So the key areas, as I mentioned, firstly, as a mentor, you can see as a mentor, your role really is to motivate, advise, ensure success, provide direction, give support, ascertain goals for your intern, and obviously incorporate training into the entire role of mentoring. In terms of a coaching perspective, focusing on skill building and problem solving, encouraging persistence and monitoring progress, helping the intern. Oh, thank you. There we go. Thanks, Rihanna. So helping the intern achieve measurable outcomes. And we found this really nice model that encompasses what a coach is in terms of a holistic model. And your role essentially is not to just provide the academic component of it, but also to take or bear in mind the social and emotional aspect of being a coach, the behavioral health and attendance, and of course the academic. So that really is your role to ensure that you produce an intern at the end of the year who is successful and competent of being a pharmacist when they get out there. From a role model perspective, demonstrating professionalism yourself, ensuring that you're ethical and your practice is of integrity, inspiring interns by setting an example, shows how to handle challenges, and you play a vital role. No intern is likely to succeed without a tutor who is competent, knowledgeable, His guidance is interactive, empathetic, and supportive. So these are the key core components of role as a tutor. And we thought the quotation by Brad Henry, which said, and I quote, "A good teacher can inspire hope, ignite the imagination, and instill a love of learning," unquote. Next slide. So this comes straight out of the tutor intern manual. And just as a refresher and as a reminder, based out of the intern manual and the tutor manual, it says to be responsible to educate and train the new graduate, provide the intern with the required equipment, materials, programs, and access to information systems and literature as necessary, provide guidance on the performance of day-to-day tasks, and aid in the development of an independent, responsible decision maker on matters affecting the health of the public. Slide. Benefits really of being a tutor are supporting the future of the pharmacy profession, diversifying skills, strengthening pharmacy practice, maintaining knowledge, and the potential for future recruitment of a newly qualified pharmacist. Next slide. And the next slide, please. Thank you. So some of the reasons why a pharmacist may not be approved as a tutor, and again, comes straight out of the intern tutor manual. The first thing is non-participation in CPDs. And as we know, in order to register as a tutor, you need to fulfill at least 4 of your CPDs. Secondly, incomplete forms. So for example, section F to be filled in by the Commissioner of Oaths could be a problem where that hasn't been completed. Non-payment of the evaluation fees, erasure from the register, pharmacists who only practices part-time in a pharmacy, and pharmacists with a suspended sentence. Next slide. So we thought of including this particular slide, which really aligns to the public sector. And essentially the reason being public sector is unique in the sense that it has many satellite sites within the institutional setting. So just to remind those that work in the public sector that interns may be allowed to rotate in the hospital settings where hospitals have been grouped together in healthcare complexes or to provide healthcare services in collaboration with CHCs or primary healthcare clinics. The following conditions need to be considered. So there must be at least one approved tutor to be responsible for the effective practical training of the pharmacist intern concerned. The facilities or hospital pharmacies where the intern will be rotating must be approved and recorded by council, and each facility must have a pharmacist to supervise that internship. The facility, the hospital pharmacy where such rotation should take place for purposes of practical training, the period that such services should be provided, as well as the name of the pharmacist under whose supervision the intern would work, must be clearly indicated, described in the contract to be approved by council before the internship actually commences. The rotation must be for the purposes of practical training only, and to note that community service pharmacists may be used to supervise the training of an intern when these rotations do occur, or if they do occur. On the delegation of training by an approved tutor, the approved tutor may not delegate his supervisory responsibilities to the community service pharmacist. So they can act, the comm service can act as a supervisor within a rotation, but they should not take on the full supervisory role. Next slide. Some legislative requirements, again, straight out of the intern tutor manual. No person may commence internship unless they are duly registered with the South African Pharmacy Council as a pharmacist intern. A contract has been entered into between the tutor and the prospective pharmacist intern at the pharmacy or institution registered as a provider of a qualification in pharmacy, for example, academic institutions at which the internship will take place. And the tutor and the practical training premises has been approved by the South African Pharmacy Council. So it has to have a training license in order to be able to assist an intern. So in terms of the anticipated training course, and I'm sure everybody is familiar with this, if you look at Board Notice 318 of 2022, you'll see that the South African Pharmacy Council published an implementation for the standards for tutor training programs. And here it is imminent in the sense that we are awaiting approval of a provider for the particular course. For this course, if you need more information, you'll see the board notice is available on the South African Pharmacy website, Pharmacy Council website. But essentially, what the purpose and rationale for the program is for those pharmacists wishing to register as a tutor to supervise any intern or pharmacist intern or for the in-service training of a pharmacist assistant. This particular qualification is to prepare and fully equip a pharmacist who is eligible to serve as a tutor with the essential knowledge and skills that they need in order to perform the role of a tutor. The rationale behind it is the tutor is a practicing pharmacist who serves as a role model for the pharmacist intern and or during the in-service training of a pharmacist assistant. And also as a role model, the tutor will be required to participate in mentoring of structuring of the program and the assessment of the intern or the pharmacist assistant. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just as a refresher, I'm sure you know this already from some of the forms that are required during internship. So you need these are all available on the South African Pharmacy Council website. Application of a session of contract of internship in terms of the Pharmacy Act is available there to be completed online. Declaration of the 400 hours of practical training when it comes to academic institutions or interns in manufacturing sites or wholesale as well. I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that now wholesale can take on an intern. So those institutions will require the interns to perform 400 practical training hours, and that's available online, the form. Progress reports as well, which must be completed by the tutor online. And then application for registration as a pharmacist with a qualification in pharmacy obtained within the Republic in terms of the Pharmacy Act 53 of 1974 must be completed online as well. Next slide. So some of the pre-registration evaluation components for interns. So remember, outside of just completing the six portfolio of evidence entries that is required, the intern also needs to be successful in the pre-reg exam. They must have completed 365 days of practical training, and the tutor has to submit all of the required progress reports which are favorable. Next slide. So just to give you an indication, some of the requirements and some of the dates that have been published in the intern manual for submission to just give you an idea, but also to just refresh your memory on, or if you're unaware of the portfolio of evidence for the interns. So they need to submit 6 portfolio of evidence entries, 1 from each domain. They need to select 1 competency standards, which is from domains 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. And we'll go through what each of them means. So what is a competency standard? What is a domain? My colleagues will assist you through that. Just to remember, the competency standard 5.3 in domain 5 is ethical and legal practice is a compulsory competency standard. So they need to complete that. There's no options other than 5.3 in domain 5. They need to fulfill at least 75% of the behaviors associated with these competency standards, and we'll explain that a little later. And note that competency standard 6.3 is recommended for academic interns, and we'll explain that as well a little later. Just as a note and as a reminder, a fee of 316 Rand is charged on submission of the 10th and subsequent portfolio of evidence entries. So if the intern is not successful and on the 10th one, they need to pay a fee. Next slide. So how do you qualify for the pre-reg exam? So submission of the portfolio of entries, evidence entries to qualify the admission into the pre-reg exam. Please take a note of the POV submission dates on your right block there. You can see the dates that are in the manual as well. Interns are encouraged to ensure that they submit their portfolio of evidence entries and succeed in them within the normal POE submission cycle, and avoid submitting POE entries after the normal POE submission deadline, as this will attract a late booking fee for the pre-reg exam. Next slide. So just to give you an idea and to remind you of the timelines in terms of the progress reports you need to submit as a tutor. So you'll see that the first report is 12 weeks with first personal and professional development report. The second one is at 24 weeks, third one is at 36 weeks, and the fourth one is at 45 weeks. So it is your responsibility to ensure that these progress reports are submitted. Please, can you ensure that you do this as the tutor? We have had incidences where tutors are giving the interns their passwords and allowing the intern to go into their own submissions to mark it or provide comment or whatever it may be. And that's where professionalism comes in as well. Just to bear in mind that you have a professional responsibility to ensure that these interns are fulfilling the requirements and are competent in whatever activity they are performing. From an academic, manufacturing, and wholesale perspective, just as a refresher as well, remember the 400 hours, the declaration of the 400 hours, and then these need to be timelessly completed within their period of time that they are interns, depending on which sector they're in. Next slide. So again, the POE for pharmacist interns is based on the 2018 competency standards for pharmacists in South Africa, which is detailed out nicely in the intern tutor manual in Annex B. And what they describe is what a newly qualified pharmacist must be capable of entry level to practice within their scope to meet the patient's needs. The framework consists of 6 domains, and each of these domains have competency standards, example 1.1, 1.2, etc. And each of those competency standards have behavioral statements A, B, C, D, etc. Thank you. Next slide. I'm going to hand you over to Rianda, who will take you through the next few slides. Thank you. Thanks, Rianda.
It's me, Vinny. Thank you very much for that.
Sorry, Makado. Apologies, Makado.
It's fine. Rihanna, can go to the next slide, please. Thank you, Vinny, for the first part of the presentations. I will continue with these sessions, starting with the CPD, as you can see on the slide, where the definition of the CPD is the process by which registered persons maintain and enhance their competence through their professional careers. And in this, it will encompass a range of activities, including continuous professional development, as well as supplementary training. And then the CPD will enable that persons to develop in the area of practice and demonstrates the competency. Right. This slide is more of giving you the CPD terminology that we are using. We have domain, competency standard, and number 3 is behavioral statement. As we go on the slides, I'm sure we will be able to articulate as to what each one of them is comprised. Right. The domains, as you may have seen in the previous slide, is it is organized, an organized of class of competencies. And then we have 6 domains, as you can see, starting with the domain 1, which is public health, as you can see, down up to domain number 6, which is the education, critical analysis. And then we can move on to the next slide where we can get more information. Yes, as you have seen that the domain is the cluster of competency standard, And then take note of how each competency standard is structured. I think in the next slide, we'll have an example of how the domain look like, the competency standard, as well as the behavior statement. But what you need to understand here is that in each and every competency standard, there are also a set of behavioral statements. We can see that in the next slide. Okay, this is just giving you an example of a domain, this time around domain 5. And under domain 5, they've given you an example of a 5.3, which is a competency standard on ethical and legal practice. And under that competency standard, there are also behavior statements, as you can see on the slide. In this 5.3 competency standard, there are 5 behavior statements from A to E. Right, this is how the you can see the structure of how the domain, the competency standard, and the behavior statements are structured. Maybe starting there on top, you can see we are on domain number 5, which is professional and personal practice. And then from the domain, we have the competency standard. So the one that we are talking about now in this example is a CS 5.3, which is ethical and legal practice. And under each competency standard, like in this example, as I've articulated in the previous slide, this one is having 5 behavior statements, as you can see, A, B, C, and D, and E. That is how it is structured. Right. Now that you understand the terminology of the domain, competency standard, and behavioral statements, how then do you ensure that the quality is maintained in what the interns are submitting? I think it's good for you to know the following, that you can use this checklist that we have advised on. For example, you can check how relevant is the learning activity that the interns may be taking through. And then you can do the appraisal as well. And then you can also check on the outcomes. Are the outcomes specific? Are they measurable? And are they linked to professional improvement? Lastly, you'll also need to check the completeness of their work, as some of the interns may need to be assisted in maybe doing the verifications if everything is well articulated, so you can help by checking the completeness. I think by understanding all this information on the checklist, that should give you an in-depth understanding of the POI process for the interns, where you can participate, you can help in providing feedback, you can have a discussion with the interns, and you can also encourage them to have self-assessment. And move on. Right. What are the POE requirements? Interns, as Veni has already indicated in the previous slides, interns need to submit 6 CPD entries, 1 from each domain, and then they are required to be successful in all 6 CPD entries. And then interns are encouraged should be encouraged not to submit all 6 entries at once. We as assessors, we see this quite often, where the whole year you won't see anything from the interns. Suddenly in September, you see all of them submitting 6 CPD entries. I think here is to your colleagues encourage them to have sufficient time throughout the year for assessment submission, and this will increase their chances of success as they will obtain feedback from the assessor and moderator, maybe when they still time, unlike when they are submitting everything at a go, in particular, maybe in 12 September, October, when they are pressed for the exam time. For each domain and from each domain, one competency standard must be chosen. I think we have already indicated that. And then they need to read all the BS very carefully so that when they start doing their CPDs, then at least they will be understanding what the CPD is all about. In the event that the competency standard is having 3 behavioral statements, it means the evidence is needed for all the behavioral statement 100%. And then in the event that they are more than 4 and above, so we always want them to provide evidence for at least 25% of the BS, but there's no harm in providing 100%. The other requirement is at least 25% in the event that we have 4 or more of BS. You interns or you guys, you can consult the 2025 intern manual for more details, and then every CPD must be certified whatever way. I think you can go to the next slide. Okay, this is the CPD cycle that colleagues, I'm sure you are already aware about this. Then is comprised of 4 phases or 4 steps. The first one is reflection, followed by planning. Number 3 is implementation, and the last one is evaluation. So I'll be taking you through in each and every phase. Starting with number 1, which is reflection. In reflection, this is where the intern will decide on the topic or the title. The title need to be appropriate. It should be aligned to the domain or the competency standard and should be relevant to what they want to learn. And then they should not just copy the information or the wording from the competency standard or the behavior statement. And then verbatim copies of the wording. This will actually imply that they'll be made not yet competent. The learning title must be unique and describe the case, your case study. Okay, under a reflection, then the question is, what is your role? As you can be reading there, you can help the interns by checking if indeed whatever they wrote is their own learning need, is their own work. And then you can also actively assist the interns to identify the relevant learning need. Most of them struggle here in identifying the learning need and the trigger. So this is maybe where you can be able to assist them, as well as maybe as to what do they want to achieve at the end of this CPD. And then on the last column is more of the practical steps that you may need to go through, where you can encourage interns by focusing on the progress and future potential. So those are the things that we can be able to do to help them progress. In each and every phase, there is a checklist, which I'm not going to go through each and every checklist. I think the one that I may probably maybe dwell on is the one and the evidence, but this is how the checklist look like. And there is a checklist for each and every phase, which you can help to gauge or to check if the intern has done everything as per the checklist. The second step of the CPD cycle is planning. Under planning, the expectation from the interns are as follows. We expect them to indicate how exactly are they going to learn this. and then what are the options. For example, they need to link the behavioral statements to the behavioral statement and structure the planning accordingly. And then they also need to mention the specific resources that they will be using. For example, they may need to give us or indicate the exact page numbers where the reference will be coming from. They can also give the chapter number and so forth. And then for whatever page specific reference that that they can be mentioning, they need to describe the reason for using that resources. For example, if they are using chapter 20 of the GPP, they need to be telling the story as to why are they using that chapter 20 and so forth. That is why we are saying they need to describe the reason for using the resource. What evidence can I submit to support my learning activity? So that is what they need to learn as well or to do as well. And then quite importantly, it is always good to remind the interns that planning should always be written in future tense. We have seen cases where it is in the past tense or present tense. So this is just for your information on, when guiding them. And then importantly, do not only describe how you plan to proceed, but say what you are going to do, how and why you are going to do things this way, as well as when you are going to. So this is what the interns are supposed to do. You can move to the next slide. Again, we have a checklist, like in summary, it will be like in the checklist, did they put the reference? Did they put the reasoning? Are they meeting the behavioral statements? So that's the information that is contained in the checklist. So we'll proceed to the next step. Okay, what can you do to assist with the planning? There are a couple of things that your colleagues you can help or do in assisting with the planning. As you can see that you can use reflective tools like the self-assessment questionnaire or skill gap analysis. You can design the training plan. You can suggest maybe goals that are SMART, meaning specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. And then you can also help in implementing the training, monitoring the progress, and encourage the interns to reflect on their progress and share the insight. So meaning that you can also use a variety of teaching methods to cater for different learning styles. We can move on. Phase number 3 is implementation. Remember, under planning is more of when they will be saying what are they planning to do in future tense. And then under implementation, this is where they need to write in the past tense. For example, if they said they'll be reading GPP, then under implementation, they should be telling us that they read the GPP. So here they need to describe what they've done. The intern must provide the context, the what, the when, the where, and the how. And more importantly, they need to link the evidence. They need to link to the evidence, and they need to they should remember to include all behavioral statements of the chosen outcome. More in particular, if you have 3 BS, but otherwise, if there are more than 3, then they should make sure that they are achieving at least 25% of the BS. Okay, we can move on. On the implementation, this is where the interns, this is a checklist to rate the interns if indeed they have described exactly what they did. The intern included the where, the when, the what, and the how. So if all these checklists are being taken care of, chances are they should be having no problems in submitting their CPDs, since the information that they need to do is included here on the checklist. Okay, now on the evidence checklist, here, like I said, the interns, or you can help the interns to check if they indeed has provided sufficient evidence. For example, has the intern covered at least 25% of the behavioral statements? And then has the intern annotated the evidence so that it is clear why he or she has included each piece. In most cases, evidence is being submitted, but in some cases, it will just be the evidence with no annotation. You can also check if the intern annotated the evidence with the behavior statements. In this case, it's always good to clearly annotate, to clearly show how each and every BS was achieved. In some cases, interns like putting one statement and then they link it to many behavior statements. I think the encouragement here is they need to clearly demonstrate how each and every BS was achieved. Is the evidence clear, reliable, whatever way, not loaded upside down? We have seen cases where it is upside down, where you can't read properly. And has the intern made sure that all patient identifying details, such as name, surname, whatever, has been hidden? I think this is what you can help in making sure that there's quality in what they're submitting. Okay. The last phase is evaluation. Here, under evaluation, I think your role may be to check if they have described what they've learned, if they describe how the new learning influenced their work of, their way of working, and if they've described or give an example of how they have applied the new learning, and lastly, what are their future learning needs. So here, like for example, NB, not what did the intern do. So here is more of like learning outcome. What has the intern learned? Application, how has the knowledge been subsequently used? The impact, how has the newly acquired knowledge changed their practice? And lastly, identification of further learning needs. So this is what you can be able to check, right? I think this is the last slide from my side is more of the evaluation, as I've already indicated. You can go through the evaluation checklist, but more importantly is to address what I've covered in the previous slide. I think this is the end of the session that I need to share with you. Over.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Makadu and Dr. Beni. So I'm going to go through the evidence now, the criteria for evidence. So if we assess and moderate the evidence, we look at the following aspects. We want to see that it's annotated, that it's current, valid, authentic, and sufficient. And in the following slides, we will go through an example and through what each of these terms mean. So what do we mean if we want to say that evidence should be annotated? We mean by that the description that you add to the evidence should give a mechanism to the meaning of the evidence. So not just the label, but to tell us why this evidence is important, why it is there. It's important that this evidence must tell a story, this annotation must tell a story. It should justify why the evidence is included. And the evidence should be planned, or the annotation should be planned and meaningful. The story that it needs to tell us what has been done to show the behavior that the intern have try to master or to indicate. So it's not single words next to parts of evidence. It's not just scribbles on evidence, and it should not lack a linking to the behavioral statement. So it must be linked to a behavioral statement. So this is just an example of annotation of the date on a prescription. So on the right-hand side, you will see there's a date, 20/01/2025, and then there's an annotation, this is the date of the prescription. So yes, we can see that's the date, but what does it mean? What is the value of that? On the left-hand side, we have the meaningful annotation. So for a prescription to be valid, it must be presented for dispensing within 1 month after it was written. This prescription is thus valid because I received it on the 20th, or I've received it on the 21st of January. So it must be meaningful and not just a statement that is not saying anything. We now have an example of a submission. I'm just quickly going through the first few slides just so that we can get to the evidence part. So we give you here the reflection. This is from Competency Standard 5.3, Ethical and Legal Practice. So we have the reflection here. On the 1st of October, I was assigned to the storeroom at Shongwe Hospital Pharmacy. We provide medication to the wards, including Schedule 6 drugs, which are highly addictive. This is the trigger scenario. Then I aim to learn the practical aspects of receiving, issuing documentation and managing these highly scheduled drugs in the pharmacy. That's the learning need. And by understanding every step in handling Schedule 6 drugs, I could prevent drug abuse and dependence, as these drugs are often misused for non-medical purposes. So this is in what, what the intern hoped to achieve. Then we go to the planning. On the first week of October, I will be stationed at the storeroom, as previously mentioned, so future tense, where I will observe and consult with the pharmacist responsible for handling scheduled drugs. Throughout this, I will adhere to the Pharmacy Act 33 of 1974 and the Medicines and Related Substances Act under the direct supervision of a pharmacist in accordance with GPP 1.4 and the scope of practice for an intern. I will also ensure that I follow the statutory code of conduct for pharmacists, as I'm still prone to make errors as a pharmacist intern. So here it's the resources used with the section mentioned and to an extent why it was used. But what is missing here is the linking to the behavioral statements. So the intern should have added for the adhere to the Pharmacy Act is behavioral statement A. You can just put, he or she can just put in brackets the abbreviation BS and then A for the code of conduct. I think that is behavioral statement E. So you can just put an E behind that. If we go on to the implementation, so with the implementation, the intern need to describe what they have done. So on the 8th of November 2024, so that is the when part, under the supervision of the tutor, and then Pharmacy Act GPP 1.4 and guidance from Section 22A. So you see there is the clearly linking to the resources again. I ordered Schedule 6. And then in brackets, what they ordered from the depot using the purchase order on Oryx Solutions. I received the drugs on the day of delivery on the 13th. I used the Oryx solution to receive it, locked them in the secure place as per the hospital SOP. On the 14th, I issued the Schedule 6. I checked everything in the order book is correct and written according to the prescriber, the date, the quantity, strength, etc. I'm doing all of this, so what and where, and the whole process was recorded on the books as per Regulation 30 under the Medicines and Related Substances Act. So that is the how part. But what is missing here is the reference to the evidence and to the behavioral statements. So in this morning's workshop with the interns, we indicated to them how they can write that and how they can put that in the implementation. So they can just in brackets again say evidence A or evidence 1, or in whichever way they label the evidence, and then / again BS A or B or C or whichever it might be. So that is important that there's reference made to the evidence and the behavioral statements. So this is then an example of the evidence. So you can see it's domain 5.3 ethical and legal practice, and you can see the evidence for behavioral statement A. So there's the Medicine and Related Substances Act, the section. It's put a block around, and then why was this used? So I reviewed the Act, section 22A, page number page 14, where I learned that as a pharmacist intern, I can handle schedule 1 to 5 or 1 to 6 medication under the supervision of a pharmacist. Hence, when I was receiving the drugs, I was supervised by the pharmacist, and it's then linked to 1.1 as well. There you can see then the boxes with the annotation at the bottom as to why the information is important, the batch numbers, the expiry dates. On the right-hand side, we have the invoice. So there's its behavioral statement A and B. So the receipt of the invoice for oxynorm and fentanyl. So again, it is annotated. So I've checked the batch number because it's important for batch traceability. I check the address on the invoice to make sure that the medicine was being delivered to the correct pharmacy. So you can see here all the relevant parts was annotated, and it was annotated clearly and to explain why is the expiry date important, why is the item description, why is that important to check the items there. And then you can see here at the bottom photo where they check the oxynorm and the fentanyl against the invoice that was received. And again, it is annotated why it is important and why it is there. Here's the evidence still continuing. Again, here's the GPP and the section that was used. It was blocked, the sections, and it was annotated what was done with this part of the GPP. And then again, it is linked to the photo evidence of the products that was received. So you can see this interlink between the behavioral statements, the resources that was used, and then the supporting evidence to show how have I applied the GPP, how have I applied the legislation. Here at the bottom is the left side bottom is the Schedule 6 register. And again, here you can see everything is annotated. Why is it here? What was the order number, the balancing. If we go on to the general regulations made in terms of the Medicines and Related Substances Act, they say this is for behavioral statement C. So I need to keep abreast of legislation. With amendments made to the MRSA, I reviewed the Regulation 35, where I learned how to make an entry on the Regulation 36, where I learned how to make an entry on the Schedule 6 register to conduct proper documentation of high scheduled drugs. So it's clearly annotated why this piece was important. Some interns also provide a screenshot from Council's website, similar to this one with registered persons, where you have the scope of practice of a pharmacist intern. They do the same with where they can find the amendments that's published on legislation, and then they say this is where I will check for updates to legislation, and then they apply the updates. Here on the right hand side is the certificate of insurance, the indemnity. So this is my indemnity insurance certificate. I obtained this as indication that I comply with my professional indemnity requirements. This morning, I also said to the interns that make sure that it is indemnity in your own name and not the general indemnity that some hospitals provide in the contract. So it must be in the intern's own name, and it must not be the application for indemnity. It must be the actual certificate that they have indemnity insurance. And then here at the bottom is the control of medicine, which they link to the code of conduct and the general guidelines. So you can see clearly the annotation. It's clear it tells a story, why it is there, why it is important, and how they used it. So then the last step is the evaluation. So I gained practical experience in the handling, recording, and issuing of Schedule 6 drugs in the storeroom. I learned the importance of ensuring accuracy in the documentation as required by the Medicines and Related Substances Act and the Pharmacy Act. So that is the what was learned part. Being under the direct supervision of a pharmacist, I had the opportunity to perform these tasks with the safety net, allowing me to develop confidence in managing controlled substances, so how it influenced his or her practice. And then they go on over all the CPDs, deepened my understanding of regulatory compliance. I aim to enhance my ability to dispense medicine safely and legally, and this will also enable me to provide better patient care. What is missing here is the application of a practical example and identifying a future learning need in terms of the skills that were learned. Important here also the application of a practical example. It should be related to the skill. So in this case, the intern should not provide as example, 2 weeks later, I was able to order a Schedule 6 product. It should be something different than what than the trigger scenario and the case that they used in the submission. It should be something different than that. Okay, if we continue with the criteria for evidence, we say that the evidence must be current. This means that the portfolio of evidence entry must relate to exposure during the internship period. So interns should not submit any evidence or any or activity that happened while they were doing the hours when they were students. It should happen during the time of registration. So if they register this year, the activity should have happened this year. For academic interns, a lot of them register later in the first year of their academic internship. And then it's important to note that even if they should have worked as a post-basic assistant, anything that they cannot submit an activity that happened in that time. It should be during the time that they are registered as an intern. If we go on, next slide, please. If we talk about the evidence needs to be valid, we mean that it must pertain to the specific competency that's being addressed. If it is factual or factually incorrect or there's calculation errors, then it is deemed as not valid, and then the intern will not be successful with that specific entry or activity. So, as I've said, it is if the evidence is not valid, then the other 4 criteria does not count. So it can be sufficient, it can be perfectly annotated, it can be current and authentic, but if it's not valid, then you will not be successful. So, for example, if the competency is about how to make sushi, but your evidence is about what is the best sauce to have with it, then it is of no value. So if you do pharmacist-initiated therapy and you submit a prescription, then it is not valid because then it's not pharmacist-initiated, but doctor-initiated. The authentic means that it should be his or her own work. And to ensure the authenticity, the evidence needs to be verified online by the tutor. So make sure that you verify the entries. One of the previous speakers said that sometimes they give the interns their login details to verify. Please don't do that. Verify it because it's your responsibility. And then sufficient for evidence to be sufficient. Mr. Makaru said that previously, if there are 4 or more behavioral statements, then the evidence that's submitted must cover at least 75% of the behavioral statements. If there are less than 4, then we need 100%. So for every behavioral statement. Encourage the intern not to use the same piece of evidence for more than one competency standard. So don't use the same prescription for 3.5, which is dispensing, and 5.3, which is ethical and legal practice, and 2.2, which is patient consultation. Use different prescriptions in that case. Do not submit the entire legislative document, so for example, the entire Pharmacy Act, only the relative parts, and do not add evidence that may have clauses for intellectual property, especially interns in manufacturing that may submit evidence that is confidential to that site where they are working. So make sure that does not happen. So please make sure that your interns have enough evidence, but focus on the quality and not only on the quantity of the evidence. So it might be that a prescription can address more than one behavioral statement, then it's fine. It must just then be properly annotated as such. So make sure about the quality and not the quantity of evidence. So if we look further, talk further about evidence, if the intern make use of photos, it's always better to make sure that there's a date stamp or check for a date stamp. It's meaningless unless the photo is authenticated and that the intern identified him or herself in that photo. We don't know the interns. So if there's a photo and there's 3 or more, 4, the number of people on the photo, we must be able to know who is the intern. But remember to maintain patient confidentiality. So either take the photo from behind the patient or blur his or her face. If you use pages from the SAMF or the MIMS or any other document, it is important to provide the name of the document, the edition and the page number, and indicate what does this show, what does this tell us. Does it only show that the intern know how to scan or use a photocopier? So annotate on that piece of evidence, what did you use and what did you use it for? Same goes for delivery notes. If you put in a delivery note or an invoice, what does this show? The stock was delivered, but we received it. Then signatures that's not annotated doesn't tell us anything. So if the intern received the stock and signed there, then we need to know that this signature belonged to the intern. If it was under the supervision of a pharmacist or the person responsible for receiving stock, his or her signature should also be there, and it should be indicated who that person is and what their role is. We always tell the interns to put themselves in the assessor's shoes before submitting the evidence and ask yourself, what does this show? And this then, if it's clear what it shows, then you know you can submit it, but it will probably point to a need for more discussion or better or more annotations that needs to be provided. Make sure that photos is not glossy or highly glossy because it makes it difficult to see on the screen what is going on there. It's very frustrated if evidence is uploaded upside down. And I think if you as a tutor verify your intern's entries, then it is something that you can pick up easily to see if it's upside down or not, and then just ask the intern just to fix that. It must be clear and legible, the evidence. It must be in one document. It just makes the story, following the storyline, easier if there's one document submitted or uploaded and not 6 documents. It's easy for the assessor to lose the storyline. It's easy for the intern then to mix up the evidence and the numbering of the evidence. So it's better to put it in one document and upload it as a single document. And then we've spoken about annotation. It's very important to make sure that the evidence is linked to a specific behavioral statement, that the intern identify their own signature and everybody else's signature on there. And remember that the assessor does not know you. So you as the tutor, you work with that intern every day. You know, if you look at the photo or you look at the invoice, that this is the intern. But we as assessors and moderators don't know that. So we need to know who who are we looking at, and whose signature are we looking at? Often interns ask, what kind of evidence should I provide? If I'm providing information to a patient, then obviously attendance register, or to a patient, it would be what evidence can I upload now? I've talked to a patient, so it can be the prescription. There was the patient handed in a prescription, or if it is pharmacist-initiated therapy, then I need to provide information. I need to get information from the patient. So a patient assessment sheet. I think, Natalie, you can just click again so that we can just get the following. So it can be a prescription, it can be a patient information leaflet or a product information leaflet, it can be a MIMS, it can be a blood pressure measurement that you take. But now I'm providing evidence to a group of people. So what would I provide then? An attendance register would help. The presentation that I actually made, or a poster that I did, the reference materials that I use, feedback that I gained from the audience. And if the intern uses attendance register, it is important that the presenter's name is on that attendance register, that there's a date and a venue, and also the topic that was discussed. And important, only one presenter. If you provide feedback on the presentation, it should reflect on the knowledge and the understanding of the audience after the presentation, and not just rating the intern that did the presenting. And remember again to annotate your attendance register or your feedback or your presentation that you uploaded, and link it to the behavioral statements. Again, if I'm consulting with a patient, what kind of evidence can I provide? Patient history, the prescription, the requests from the patient, the blue copy, the label. But what if I'm consulting with a doctor? So you see, it's different scenarios, it's different pieces of evidence that you will need to provide. If you consult with a doctor, you can think about what was the reason for the consultation. For example, there's an anomaly on a prescription that you need to verify, or a possible interaction or an allergy that the patient have. The reference material that you will use, the telephone number of the doctor and the time of the conversation. So make sure that the references that you use and the resources that you use is scientific, not Wikipedia. Wikipedia is not scientific. It must also be annotated and linked to the behavioral statements. And again, if you use something like the SIMF or the MIMS, make sure that the intern use or include the page numbers and the edition of that resource or reference that was used. Sometimes the interns attend a meeting. So if you just attend the meeting, make sure that you provide the agenda, the attendance register, the minutes of the meeting, and very important, the contribution that the intern made during that meeting. If the intern had to present something, then that should be clearly indicated. If you just attend a meeting, you cannot prove that you did something. You just sit there, you did not participate. So you must show participation in the meeting and not just attendance of a meeting. If you do the research competency standards 6.6, I will be working with data. So what evidence, the reason for the data collection, a screening report, the data analysis that can be provided. Just make sure about confidentiality again. Next slide. This is just a re-emphasis on the checklist. Mr. Makadu did go through it, so I'm not going to go through it again. This is in the intern manual. So ask the intern tomorrow to bring you the manual if you don't have a copy of it, or to share it with you via WhatsApp or email, so that you can also look at these checklists and also the assessment criteria that is in the manual. So to summarize evidence, the evidence is proof of what was done. what the intern did. It's not reading an article. It is not a theoretical scenario. It is not witnessing someone else. So the intern cannot include as the evidence where he witnessed you as the tutor doing compounding, or you as the tutor providing information to a patient. He must do it self. With the evidence, the intern must convince the assessor that he or she performed the activity, and it needs to be professional. It must be clear and neat and not scribbled on a prescription or scribbled on a piece of paper. It must be professionally presented. So we have said that it is a stepwise approach to completing CPD entries. So it started with the intern that completed the annual declaration and then enter and submit it online. The tutor must then verify. So the tutor verify and submit it online for assessment. And then you need to check for feedback. And this is also where the tutor play an important role, is to help the intern with that feedback that he or she receives. Then we can move on. So when we do assessments, it is done mostly on a scale of 0 to 3. And to earn 3 marks, all the requirements must be met. And there is assessment criteria for each of the 4 phases of the CPD cycle, and that is available in the intern manual. In addition, you must have used an appropriately professional communication style that is free of spelling and grammatical errors. It's properly punctuated and trade names are capitalized. And you as the tutor can also check that when you verify the entry. Remember, we also told the interns this morning that spelling and grammar are not auto-corrected and that they should check everything carefully before we submit. A tip that I also ask my interns to do when they submit CPDs is they must first do it in a Word document where they can type everything, where it can be spell checked and grammar checked before they copy and paste then into the CPD cycle for submission. So, and remember, as Veni also said at the beginning, the purpose of this is not to ask you to assess your intern before they submit. It is just to guide you as to how we do the assessments. So we said it's on a scale of 0 to 3, where 0 is not yet met and 3 is fully met and everything is there. So yes, in the manual you can check for the full details of how the marks are allocated at each step of the cycle. So once an entry has been assessed, the intern will receive feedback from the assessors. There will be comments that is usually dated. There can be positive, or there should be positive feedback also, where we acknowledge that the intern is on the right track and is doing things correctly. But there will also be negative feedback. And then we will give pointers with regards to what was wrong and how the intern can improve it. And especially with regards to the evidence and annotation, there's usually a lot of comments there, or more comments there. And the comments needs to act as a guideline for future entries, even if the intern was successful. If the entry was assessed to be successful, don't ignore the comments. Go to the comments and see, how can I improve? Maybe my evidence was borderline, and I've missed on annotation, or I've missed something. Then how can I improve my future submission so that would be successful? There is also feedback sessions later in the year for the interns, where we go through the most common errors or problems that we've experienced, errors that interns make, and then we also help them or try to guide them there on how to go about and how to fix, not fix, or how to redo the activities. So if the entry was found to be not yet successful, the intern then needs to resubmit a competency standard within that specific domain. And each resubmission is seen as a standalone activity and is treated as a new submission. And it's important to remember and to tell the interns that the assessors and the moderators can see the previous submission or the previous entry as well as the comments that was made. So in that way, we can see, was there any improvements made, or did the intern just resubmit? Interns should not just resubmit, because the same assessor and the same moderator gets that entry every time. So in order to maximize the chance to be eligible to write the intern examination, interns need to submit early, and they need to submit regularly and on a monthly basis. You know by now that if they want to write the first opportunity in August, then they need to have submitted all 6 their entries, and they have to be successful in 3 of them. And now if they wait until July before they submit, or June, which I can't remember the last date, and they submit all 6 and they are not successful in all 6 of them, then they won't be able to write the exam. So rather encourage the interns to submit regularly and earlier than to wait because it's going to put stress on them and you as the tutor. Common errors that we see on the resubmission is that the comments made by the assessors and the moderators are not followed. It's just ignored. That interns make no changes on the resubmission, or that retrospectively they falsify evidence to meet the assessor comments. And it's easy to spot, to know when evidence was falsified. So it's important that interns should start on a new POE entry unless the assessor has recommended that you can correct that entry. So you have to look at the comments. For example, if it was just breach of patient confidentiality, then that can be fixed and the intern can resubmit that entry again after fixing that patient confidentiality. But if it is something else, for example, it was compounding and the incorrect expiry date was provided, then it cannot be fixed. Then the intern need to start completely over with a new entry, a new mixture that he or she needs to compound. And important then to check that all the phases of the cycle align to the new information that was provided. It often happens that the intern don't fix or amend or change the learning, the reflection and the planning, but in the implementation, let's stick to the example of the compounding. The expiry date was incorrect. Now they just changed that part where they now make a new or a different compound, different product that they compound, but now this does not correspond with what was said in the planning and the reflection in the beginning. So make sure that the storyline continue throughout the 4 phases and that all the phases correlate. To prevent the need for further resubmissions, make sure to follow the comments or the recommendations made by the assessors and the moderators. And as I've said, the resubmitted portfolio of evidence entry are sent to the same assessor. So don't just resubmit, don't encourage the intern to make the changes and not just resubmit without attending to the reasons that the entry was not successful. The interns are allowed to submit 9 POE entries. So that is 6 plus a 50% resubmission. But as of the 10th submission, then there is a fee that is levied by council. So make sure that your intern don't go over that 9, doesn't need to submit more than 9 entries. Otherwise, they will need to pay for that. Professionalism is very important. You have heard about the plagiarism software that was implemented. So there's a Turnitin report that is generated for every submission. Tabang will talk about that whole process at the end of this presentation. It's important that the POE entry reflect the intern's own work. It happens that we find that there's irregularities. Interns submit the same photos, then that will be referred to the council's professional conduct department, and they will look into that, and there will be penalties, and they will be applied, and they will be severe. So please encourage the interns to do their own work and to not work together. We have said that group work is not allowed. And remember, ethical rule 16 states that failing the supervising practical training of a pharmacist assistant to carry out his duties, or failing to attend in good time to the administrative duties attached to the registration of pharmacist intern or the pharmacist assistant. So that's one of the ethical rules that we need to and also, and I've said this morning to the interns as well, these entries or these portfolio of evidence submissions, it's more than just another hurdle. It's an opportunity that intern have to further develop their professionalism, and it's also an opportunity for you as a tutor to develop in your professional way of practice. And this is also that you can use this as a CPD of your own, this whole portfolio of evidence and helping and being a tutor to an intern. Confidentiality, and this is where my section is going to end. We have spoken about confidentiality. That is very important. It must be maintained at all times. Check the prescriptions, the trailer labels, the Schedule 6 registers, photos, attendance registers, etc. If patient confidentiality is breached, then it's automatically not yet successful, the entry, and the intern will not be successful and will have to resubmit. And it's important that confidentiality only applies to patients, not to other healthcare professionals, staff attendance registers. If the intern provides education and training to pharmacy personnel, we all know that you don't need to log into the council's website to look up a pharmacist assistant or a pharmacist. Same with HPCSA website. You can look there and search there for a doctor's practice number, etc., and see if they are active or not. So it only applies, confidentiality only applies to patients, and make sure that the name is completely obscured. As you can see on this slide on the right-hand side, you can still make out that Smith surname, but the black block is more sufficient to obscure the patient's name. But just be careful not to blank out all of the evidence in order to maintain patient confidentiality. If the patient's signature is of such a nature that you cannot make out the name or the surname, then it doesn't need to be blanked out. But otherwise, make sure that patient confidentiality is maintained. And this is where I'm stopping and then handing over again. Thanks, Rini.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
Rianda.
Thanks, Tabang.
Yes, okay, thanks, Vinny. And the time now is 7:30. So we're going to take a short break of 5 minutes just to stretch and get a cup of tea, and then we will be back at 25 to 8. Thank you. Okay, thank you all. The time is now 25 minutes to 8, and I'm going to hand over to Dr. Badayachi to take us through. Over to you. Thank you.
All right, Tabang, thank you so much. So thank you to my colleagues, Rianda and Mikado, for going through the CPD cycle. And just to reiterate, again, as Rianda has already mentioned, that this presentation is really purely as a guide, and hopefully you could use this as a tool as you go through your year with your intern. Remember, the next whatever slides we've presented, you can come back to, as Tabang has mentioned already. So please use this as an opportunity or as a tool to guide you through the year. The next few slides is a decision-making aid. And essentially what we try to do here, and we've also included this in the intern presentation, was to guide you on what are the recommended, possible, and challenging competency standards throughout the different domains. Next slide, please. So in domain 1 and domain 2, remember, you don't have to remember this, but just go through it with me, but you can use it as a tool later on. So if you look at the recommended ones in domain 1, so 1.1 is really one of the more popular ones. Interns tend to choose that particular one because it's easier to do, and I think interns have the opportunity to be able to fulfill that in their year. So that's the one that where they get the opportunity to present a particular poster or do a pamphlet, for example, on whatever, be it malaria, hypertension, diabetes, etc. So that's the most common one that we do receive in domain 1, and it really is an easier one to do. The other recommended one is 1.6, which is the screening activity. However, there are quite a few challenging ones, which is 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. And this is based really on the ability for the intern to be able to achieve all of those behavioral statements within each of those domains. So in domain 2, 2.1 and 2.2 and 2.6 are the most commonly selected ones by interns. From my experience, 2.1, 2.2 really is common amongst the interns, and there is sufficient evidence for them to be able to fulfill those particular competency standards. The challenging one there is 2.8, and that's in relation to a clinical trial, which makes it really difficult for an intern to fulfill. Next one. Domain 3 and domain 4. So domain 3 is dispensing activities. So 3.4 is the most popular one and is recommended, and interns generally succeed in 3.4. Although it's a relatively long competency standard with many behavioral statements, and there's very different aspects to it, but interns generally fare well in that particular one, and we do recommend that they do attempt that one because of the opportunity to obtain all of the evidence that is relevant in terms of the 75% that is required. The other one is 3.5, which is the extemporaneous compounding one. Now, don't be fooled with 3.5 because it's just a single behavioral statement. However, it is one of the more difficult ones where because it's such an open-ended behavioral statement where it just says the ability to or demonstrate how you would compound, it really opens up all of the different aspects of good manufacturing practice, GPP, the minimum standards of extemporaneous compounding. And we want to be able to see the skills of the intern to be able to demonstrate that they are capable of performing extemporaneous compounding. So here the detail is quite intense, and the assessor and the moderator requires that the intern provides evidence such as expiry date, batch numbers, pictures on how the extemporaneous compounding has occurred, in terms of hygiene and cleaning up the area, the scale, etc. So there's really many different aspects to it, although it's just a single behavioral statement. But in saying that, it is something that can be achieved by an intern, and we recommend that one. The challenging one is 3.3 for domain 3. Domain 4, the most popular one amongst interns, is 4.6. 4.6 is just 2 behavioral statements, and there it says application of policies and standard operating procedures. So here, the only challenge we face with 4.6 is often the confusion between what is a policy and what is an SOP. Often we find interns submit the good pharmacy practice as a policy. Remember, it is not seen as a policy. The policies that we guide interns to look through are generally the ones that, for example, within an institution, you would get health and safety, you would get pest control. There's just so many that you could guide them in terms of a policy. National drug policy is more popular these days as well. So you can use that as a policy. And just to remember that it's very key in the behavioral statements that says, and in the competency standards, it says to apply that particular policy and SOP. So we need to see not just the evidence of the policy and the SOP, but actually how did the intern apply those policies? The challenging one is 4.2, which is applicable to both institutional and community sectors, but difficult to achieve. But generally speaking, as I said, the most common one and interns generally succeed is 4.6. Next one. Domain 5, there's no choice here. So 5.3, which is the compulsory one, and it's the ethical and legal aspects. With this particular one, we do generally find challenges where interns are not fulfilling the 75% requirement of evidence, but also they tend to lean towards providing Schedule 6 as the only evidence for 5.3. And I think ethical and legal practice, there's just so much we could attempt with 5.3. So just to guide them on 5.3, that other than Schedule 6's, expand their horizons of other potential areas from an ethical and legal perspective that they could potentially look into in line with the Pharmacy Act and the Medicines Related Substance Act. Domain 6 is the training domain, and the recommended one there is 6.2 and 6.6, but 6.3 is possible as well, which we do often find interns submit. And 6.8 is a challenging one and more aligned to academic interns. And 6.1 as well, which is the education policy. In terms of 6.2, which we recommend, and it is one of the more popular ones that are submitted in this particular domain, here it can be used for the training of pharmacist assistants within the workplace environment as per their scope of practice. However, the biggest challenge with 6.2 is, if I'm not mistaken, it's 3 behavioral statements. So immediately, based on the rules, they need to submit evidence for all 3 behavioral statements. And sometimes interns don't fulfill that requirement and perform poorly with 6.2 and sometimes partially comply with that one. But also the training plan fits into 6.2. So the expectation is for them to understand what a training plan is, to go and look up what a training plan is, and hopefully you can guide them on what a training plan should look like. And that generally is the reason why they don't fulfill that particular 6.2 is because the training plan is missing. Next slide. So these are really the guidelines in terms of how to complete the CPD. So the next one is also a few slides. Next slide. Is to guide you on the relevant or appropriate evidence that we have gathered over the years as to which ones are appropriate for each of the domains and the competency standards. Again, I'm not going to go through in detail through each one. It's really a tool for you to have a look at when you need to. But just to give you an idea, for example, 1.1, which is the recommended public promotion of health one, here you could suggest such as a poster to promote health, evidence of an attendance register by whoever the audience is, and showing evidence of pictures of people who have been, who this presentation has occurred to. So it has to be an audience, a group of people, and obviously confidentiality is important there. 2.1, for example, consultation area. We could have a look at, sorry, somebody's mic is on. So they could look at consultation area, language sensitivity, insensitive issues in terms of cultural beliefs, etc. So provide evidence that is relevant to that. 2.2, counseling plan. So they have to really, and you can guide them, and I'm sure you come across evidence that will align to all of these behavioral statements. Remember, the 75% rule does apply. The annotation is really important, especially for domains, or if they select a competency standard with multiple behavioral statements, it becomes really challenging for us to be able to identify which evidence aligns to which behavioral statement. So we would like you to guide them through making sure that they annotate appropriately and give us the story as to what they were thinking when they're describing how they are expecting us to see them as being competent for that particular evidence. Next slide. Domain 3 and domain 4. So domain 3, 3.1, 3.4. Also 3.4 is really long. So there's many behavioral statements there. The evidence with prescriptions. I think there's calculations there as well. So just to be able to provide a prescription if it's a dispensing activity, for example. Domain 4, the policy one, as I mentioned already, is really popular, and to be able to provide the policy and the standard operating procedure, but also to show how it's being applied. Next slide. Domain 5 and 6. Domain 5.3 is compulsory. So the challenge here, as I said, most interns choose the option of going with a Schedule 6 and the description of how, from a legal and ethical perspective, a Schedule 6 register needs to be applied, what prescription, the rules around it. But please guide them at the possibilities of other aspects of ethical and legal aspects. The keeping abreast is one of the common errors that we have challenges, assessors and moderators, where we find that interns don't select or don't provide sufficient evidence to show how they're keeping abreast with current legislation. And I'll give you an example, and I think I remember Rianda had showed it in the previous slide, where the scope of practice has changed according to Regulation 12 and 13 last year. And we had interns submit towards the end of the year the old scope of practice of pharmacist assistants, technicians, or pharmacists, basic and post-basic and technicians. So they weren't giving us the most recent scope of practice. And obviously that means and indicates to the assessor and the moderator that the intern is not keeping abreast and not aware of the latest changes. And here you can guide them onto the Pharmacy Council website that shows clearly what are the latest legislations that have changed. Domain 6, I went through the training 1, 6.2. The training plan is really important. Clarifying the role of a more experienced colleague as well in the description. Those things are important there. Next slide. So that was all of the evidence that we would recommend. And as I said, I don't want to go into detail, but you can use that for your, when you can use it as a tool later on. But what was interesting, when we had a presentation by a tutor in the Limpopo area, Mr. Rasikela, and these slides come from him and his presentation. He pointed out, based on his experience within the Limpopo district, some of the challenges that he thought interns faced and some of the challenges that he found that tutors experienced. So from an intern challenge, and really this is purely from his experience, it's got nothing to do with evidence that we've gathered as assessors and moderators. We haven't done any research in this area. So just to make you aware that potentially you have had other challenges that maybe you could let us know about. But from his experience in that area, he found that from a core competency development perspective, lack of planning capabilities, non-independent thinking, lack of independent learning ability, lack of comprehensive analysis capability, and insufficient preparation towards each of the competency standards or portfolio of evidence. Communication as well that interns found challenging, adaptability, creativity, the ability to work within a team or work as a team, transparency and time management in terms of the skills. And then their attitude, you found that there was generally a lack of enthusiasm and initiative amongst the interns, no sense of responsibility, lack of passion, generally unhappy, low morale, and mental issues on the rise. So if you look at these key areas within the challenges of an intern, your role as a mentor and a coach really comes in, and to be able to guide the intern through that transition from an undergrad program into the job market would really shape the way they move towards or try to achieve their goal within their internship year. From a tutor challenge perspective, again, I said this is really from a Limpopo perspective, and there's no research behind it, and it was his experience. So he found that there was a lack of teaching planning. There's no real plan from the tutors. Assessment versus compliance in the submissions, looking at whether the tutor understands what is their role from an assessment perspective. Is it compliance or is it really assessment? Limited time allocated for verification. So he mentioned that sometimes the intern would submit and expect the tutor to verify in a very short period of time before the submission date. So I think one of the things that you as a tutor need to be cognizant of is the ability to give yourself some time to go through all of these submissions and have a fair engagement with whatever submission that they have submitted, so you can give them better feedback and guidance. Non-standardized approach to the CPDs, so being non-systematic in the way it's being approached. Limited tutor support or no defined support system. So hopefully from a tutor support perspective, now that we have tutor workshops and you have access to these tools via the PowerPoint presentation on YouTube, hopefully the process will get a little bit easier for you.
Before the end, if you can look at that process. So what is important for me here that I want you to take note of is that the maximum acceptable similarity score is 20%, and anything greater than 20% is considered to be high. And in that the case, we're encouraging interns to review their entries and amend where necessary and resubmit for plagiarism detection. So the interns have been taken through the process. They know exactly what they need to do. And so the next step, I will be taking you through how the CPD platform, so that you can see what is it that you will be doing. So this is more of a refresher for those who have been interns before. Tutors, before. And then it will be a training for the new tutors of interns. So I decided just to take you through the whole CPD verification process, and you will see where the part of the CPD plagiarism report comes in as we continue. Like I said, this will also benefit the new tutors. So what is happening here is that when the tutors log on to the CPD platform, there is the CPD dashboard. That's where you need to click, and when you are there, you will be able to see all these activities, verification, assessment, and so forth. So the relevant activity for the verification of CPD entries is the first one, which is written verification. So after clicking on that one, then you will go into the next slide, wherein you will be able to view the intern submission. So I've highlighted in red there. So here you will be able to see the P number of the intern who has submitted, as well as the name, and then the number of entries that have been submitted, and the number of entries that have been verified. So to see more details about the entries submitted by this intern, there is the view button there that you must click, and that will take you to the next page, wherein you will be able to see what the intern has submitted. So here you can see that there are 2 entries that are awaiting submission. There are 2 entries that are awaiting for assessment. And because of the size of the slide, we have cut the 2 entries that are submitted for verification. So in this case, you must go to the entries that are submitted for verification. There will be a view button like this one. So just click on it, and then that will allow you to have access to the intern's entry. So here the entry will follow the 4th step of a CPD cycle, like it has been mentioned in the previous presentation. So you will be able to see what the intern has written under reflection, and at the same time, you will be able to see the assessment criteria. So this will assist you to see if the intern is meeting what is required in the assessment criteria as you are going through their submission. And when you're done with the reflection step, you just click on the continue button, and that will take you to the planning step. And then the arrangement is the same. There is planning, and there is also the assessment criteria there. So when you are done with this, you will also continue to click on the continue button, and that will take you to the next step, which is the implementation phase. So when you are here, still you will be able to see the activity that has, the implementation that the intern has, how the intern has implemented the plan that he mentioned or was mentioned in the previous slide, and then there will be the assessment criteria as well. And then please note that at this step, that's where the intern upload their evidence. So that can be accessed by clicking on the document part. That's where it's highlighted in red. So when you click on the document, and then it will show the date on which it was submitted. When you click there, you will be able to see the intern's evidence, and that's how you will be able to do the checks which were mentioned in the previous presentation as well, just to make sure that the evidence is also up to standard. And then when you are done with the step, you will go to the last step, that is the evaluation step. So when you are at the step, the assessment criteria is also provided there, and the intern's evaluation is also provided there. So when you are done with that part of the entry, then you can be able now to view the plagiarism report. So this will allow you to see the score, whether the intern plagiarism score or the similarity score is above the required 20% or is within the acceptable range. Again, when you are here, that's where you will be able to return the entry to the intern in case there are things that needs to be corrected. And then if you are happy, then you will submit for assessment. You can see submit for assessment is green. It means everything here is good. So let's now see how the report will look like, the plagiarism report. So this is how the report will look like after you have clicked on the view the plagiarism report. This is exactly what you will see, and then this is just a summary of the report. It shows the overall match percentage here is 2, so it means this intern did well. Not many things from her entry are really similar to what has been submitted before. But in case you need to view the full report, you're going to click on Open PDF report. And then when you open the PDF report, this is where you will be able to see the complete report. And the report will also be highlighted. The areas or the text that is similar will be highlighted in blue. If you can see on that page, there is a text highlighted in blue, and that is written marked as number 1. So that's how you'll be able to see what has been detected as similar to the work that was submitted by other interns, either the current or those who did their internship in the past. And then from there, then you will be able to advise the intern accordingly whether they should rework on their CPD entry and resubmit, or whether everything is in order. So in case you want I mean, when you are done with the report, rather, then you just click the back button. I mean, you have to exit from the PDF, and then there will be a back button that you must click, and then it will take you back to this page that we are seeing. And this is where you will decide whether you return the entry to intern for correction or you submit for assessment. And then if all is well with the report, then you are and you have submitted for assessment. So the status of the report will change on the page that you are working on, meaning under that particular intern, it will show that this CPD entry has been submitted for assessment. And then again, there will be the date on which the entry was assessed. So please make sure that you check, because sometimes tutors, they forget to click that submit button and they just close the CPD page thinking that they have submitted, and only to find out when the results are released that they didn't click the submit button. So make sure that you submit, and you also verify by checking the status of that particular entry. And then in case the entry has been returned to the intern, the same process will be followed. When the intern is done, they will be able to resubmit for verification, and the tutor will check if the intern has responded to all the comments. So this is basically, in short, what the changes that have been made to the CPD for interns, or the POE for interns, and also what you need to take note of in order to find the verification process easy. And then I think this is more or less the last slide. And then from there, we also encouraging tutors to communicate with counsel in case they need assistance with regards to the internship program, being a portfolio of evidence, or whether you need help with the exams, or the progress reports, please feel free to do so. And these are the contact details that you should use to contact the office. And this brings me to the end of my presentation. And then we are ready for questions. Natalie, thank you.
Thanks, Tabang. We don't have any questions at the moment. If you would like to ask us a question, please, if you're on Teams, go to the Q&A section and type in your question there. If you're joining us on YouTube, please feel free to type your question in the comment section. We will get to it. We have posted the attendance register and survey link. If we can ask all attendees to please click on the link, complete the survey, give us your feedback, let us know how we can improve. We'll give you a couple of minutes to send through your questions.
Tabang, may I please just say something while we're waiting for questions?
Yes, Rianda, please feel free.
Thanks, Tabang. Yes, it's just something that I found helpful for me with my interns, and maybe it can help some of the other tutors. In order to make the process go quicker from submission through verification and assessment, I ask my interns that I see their submission before they submit for verification. Because we know that interns tend to wait until the deadline date to submit, and then there's a lot of pressure to verify, and if they need to make corrections, you must first send it back to them. They must make corrections and then submit it again. But if you have a look at the CPD or the POE before they submit, then you can already highlight some of the issues or the problems that you can see before they submit for verification. I just noticed that this it saves some time for both the tutor and the intern. But the long and the short is that you will need to plan and tell your interns to plan their CPDs ahead and not to wait for the deadline, because load shedding happen and the system is offline, or council need to do maintenance, or whatever the case may be. So yes, tell the interns to plan and to submit on time, so that they don't get caught after the deadline. Yes, that's just my 2 cents for the evening. Thanks, Tabang.
Thank you, Rianda, for sharing that with other tutors. I hope it will assist some. Natalie, anything?
Yes, Tabang, we have one question. Where can we get a copy of this presentation?
Okay, thank you, Nat. Available on our website from tomorrow. So you can be able to get it from there. Thank you.
Devang, it seems as if there are no further questions if you'd like to wrap up.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. And this brings us to the end of our workshop. And I just want to thank you all for staying with us for the duration of this workshop. And I hope the information that was shared with you this evening will assist and make the process of tutoring intense and easy one. And then please note that we are planning feedback sessions for tutors somewhere in June. There will be feedback sessions for interns, and we are also introducing the ones for tutors this year. And in those workshops, our assessors will be there to share with you their experiences and also to advise on how best can we assist the interns so that they can be successful in their entries. And with those few words, I just want to thank you once again, the tutors, assessors, and moderators who were here to assist with the presentations, as well as the colleagues from the office for all the support. We really appreciate it, and have a good evening. Thank you all. Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.